If you thought legacy media finally got cannabis right, think again. The New York Times just dropped an editorial and a podcast flipping their script, and it's loaded with selective stats and a vibe that treats legal weed like something that we should apologize for. Let's unpack it. Emily Bazelon, as the host, notes how much stronger modern weed is, sticking only to edibles herself. She recalls being told addiction was impossible and overthinking legalization initially, but now she sees it as a challenge. She advocates for grudging toleration as a balanced approach, highlighting how cannabis has ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar industry without adequate controls. Herman Lopez, drawing from personal experience with edibles as a teen versus now, emphasizes the potency spike as well. He supported legalization, expecting measures to roll out amid opioid concerns, but criticized the surge in uses, exceeding alcohol and heavy consumption, and rising addictions. He argues daily use hampers productivity, cites surveys of people struggling to quit, and says taxes on both alcohol and weed are too low in his view. For medical use, he doubts broad efficiency, noting lack of FDA backing, dispensary overlabeling, and studies favoring alternatives or abstinence. He also flags kid-targeted branding like double-stuffed Stonios and Trips Ahoy. David Leonhardt says from his walks in DC, New York, and Colorado, he observed pervasive weed smells, proliferating shops outpacing tobacco outlets, and growing normalization. He supports alcohol-like restrictions and opposes recriminalization, like in Massachusetts with their recent bill, due to disproportionate arrests on African American, Latino, and poor groups, plus job losses. Still, he stresses knowing downsides like increased use, illness, and addiction. His solution: THC-based tax hikes, akin to whiskey over beer, to curb excess without banning casual use. He warns good liberals that big weed thrives on heavy uses, acknowledging black market risk from taxes, but compares taxing the rich as an imperfect yet necessary, and says it would deter brands from aggressive, harmful marketing. Now let's take a slow breakdown of their points that they brought up during their podcast and during their article. Starting with daily use. They highlight about 18 million daily or near daily cannabis users, 17.7 million from 2022's data, topping daily alcohols at 14.7 million users. That's spot on for heavy users, but is misleading without context. Total past year alcohol users are still over 130 million, while cannabis sits at around 50 to 62 million. The reality is that most cannabis users are occasional to moderate, not consistently and constantly stoned. On teen use, they imply legalization is driving kids to it. But in 2025, a survey shows past cannabis use is stable or even declining for the 5th straight year. 8% for 8th graders, 16% for 10th graders, 26% for 12th graders, and abstination rates are at a historic high. There is no major surge in legal states. Often it's the opposite. So where they have this cherry-picked data, I am unsure. And yes, 10 to about 30% meet the criteria of addiction to cannabis use disorder, especially daily to early starters. And it's similar to alcohol among its users. Many cases are mild to moderate and resolve naturally without treatment. Surveys do show some folks struggle to quit, but the majority of users aren't dependent. It's not the epidemic that they're trying to portray. They also use the classic amotivational syndrome, and that doesn't hold water in modern research. A 2022 multi-site study from UCL, Cambridge, and King's College found no real difference in apathy or ability to enjoy reward between users and non-users, even daily ones. Sure, acute intoxication can impair you temporarily, but there's no broad chronic motivation drop once you control for other factors like personality or co-use of substances. Plus, legalization has created over 425,000 plus jobs with no net hit to labor participation and or earnings. They bring up medical claims. Now, there's strong evidence for FDA-approved applications like easing chemo and nausea, or boosting appetite in HIV patients, even treating certain epilepsies. Moderate support exists for some chronic or neuropathic pain, and even opioid-sparing effects in real-world studies. But it's weaker and conclusive for things like anxiety, insomnia, PTSD, and dispensaries definitely overhype the claims. That is a legit problem, but it doesn't mean there's zero benefit overall. CHS, a severe vomiting issue. Cases have risen with higher potency and heavier use, but again, data links it to mostly daily users, around 17.8% of daily users actually. Only those 17.8% are affected by CHS, and it's not blanket proof that legalization is a complete disaster. Of course, there's no denying a huge jump in potency. Average flower went from about 4% THC in the 1990s to 15 to 25% today, with concentrates reaching 90 to 98%, so a lot higher than past. States have raked in over $20 billion from adult taxes so far. But when taxes get too high, it backfires big time. Case in point, California. They seized and destroyed illicit cannabis worth over $609 million in 2025 alone, up 18 times since 2022. Legal market share is often under 40%, and recent tax hikes have been linked to dips in legal sales. New York has hit about $2.5 billion in cumulative legal sales, but thousands of unlicensed shops still run and show there. The black market actually grew after legalization because prices stayed sky high. Look, this grudging toleration phrase and the overall tone is straight up toxic for cannabis as a whole. They're cherry-picking heavy use data and create this crisis narrative while glossing over huge wins. Arrests have plummeted, especially in Black and Latino communities. Regulated products are tested and way safer than black market junk. Billions in tax revenue are funding schools, roads, and hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created. Their main solution, jacking up taxes even more with THC-based hikes, driving people to untested, potentially even stronger illegal products, and perpetuating the very harms that they're complaining about. I'm not sold on the piling more regularization or higher taxes as an answer. That often just complicates things and hurts access for people who benefit from it. Instead, I'd say let's push for stricter FDA standards and actual medical claims to cut the hype and ensure labels are backed by real evidence. That way, we separate legit therapeutic uses from the overblown stuff without stiffing the industry, recreating prohibition problems. Cannabis deserves an honest conversation, not this regretful, stigma-loaded framing that sets us all back. But what do you think? Is this media flip helpful, or do you think it's harmful? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're rolling with the facts, subscribe for more breakdowns. Hit the bell. Peace.